Really probably should put up a warning before I talk about this card, because most people it's like a horrible flashback that they really don't really want to go through, including myself, because I hate this card, but it is amazing. And today, it's going to be the focal point of what we talk about as far as the archetypes that it's derived and the things that it's created and done to me to make me kind of a sad person. So, Arclight Phoenix obviously came out in Ravnica, not the original, the first set in the Ravnica block that we are currently in. Arclight Phoenix, I remember when this card was spoiled and people were talking about it, nobody liked this card. They thought it was a really bad Phoenix, a 4-mana 3/2 flying haste that you can get back if you cast 3 or more instants of sorceries on your turn before combat. It kind of did everything that most players don't want to do. Obviously, casting spells before your second main phase is something that players don't generally want to do, because they obviously want to attack first and get their opponent to waste a removal spell on something else and then play their big thing or what have you. And Arclight Phoenix kind of breaks the mold by making you have to cast those spells before the beginning of combat on your turn to have this thing come back. So, really, just from that analysis and from what people were thinking, especially 3 or more instant or sorcery spells in Standard, that's insane to find enough good spells like that to be able to make this card worth it and to just really want to build around it. As we all know, that didn't last long until people were just like, oh, even with these kind of mediocre spells that we can cast in Standard, instant sorcery spells, this card's still pretty good when it just brings back more than one of them. So we got the blue-red Phoenix archetype in Standard. I don't think it was that long after, honestly. Probably maybe a month or two at most after the set came out. I'm going to say probably a month at most. This card was out and was legal. Everyone was just playing blue-red Phoenix and just playing all these the Drakes and then obviously the 4 Phoenix to just churn through their deck, make big Drakes, or just bring out like a ton of these Phoenix and kill your opponent that way. Because there's no really like good way to stop it. Son of the Wreckage was sort of on the decline as far as like the sweeper of choice, and people were going towards the cleansing Novas and things like that. Well, it turns out things that don't exile graveyards or exile these Phoenixes are pretty bad, because this thing just gets to keep coming back after they've cycled so many cards and cast so many spells to just, here you go, 9 damage right to your face. Now figure it out or you're dead next turn. So, while this card was like an underdog when it was spoiled, to find a deck that it could possibly be playable in, to being a part of one of the 2 or 3 best decks of last season's format, what the heck happened to it? Well, it's easy. People found out that this card was busted and played other archetypes that had more exile effects and were just grindier and overall better against the field than this Arclight Phoenix deck. So, what did Drakes do? They adapted to not playing this card or playing it in a different shell to basically be more explosive and just try to power through other people's like bigger creatures and mid-range creatures, and instead of trying to fight on the ground and hopefully connect with 1 or 2 hits from a really big Drake, they just play Arclight Phoenix and then some of the Crackling Drake, and then try to beat their opponent that way and be more explosive against the control decks than they are against the mid-range and aggro decks. Still, to this day, as far as Standard's concerned, I'm going to say this card's basically done for. Like, there's just better things that you could be doing in Standard than flipping Arclight Phoenixes into play. And while that's still really cool and it's still really powerful and considered a very powerful thing, there's just, in terms of the format, it's just not that good anymore. It's not as inviting as playing like Sultai mid-range or playing mono blue aggro, mono white aggro, white red aggro, all the other plethora of mid-range decks and other things you could be doing. Like, this is just kind of play it out and old. Now, in terms of modern and legacy, this card can just be the stone cold nuts. Like, this card just makes those decks very powerful. Like the blue red spells I guess is what you probably would have called it, is just like a blue moon, just like play Blood Moon, leave up a bunch of counter spells, and so you can eventually just slowly win the game and grind your opponent out, to now we just kill them on turn 3 or turn 4, and they really couldn't interact with us game 1 unless they had like Lightning Bolt or Revolted Fatal Push or Path to Exile, which obviously is really good against the Phoenix, but also not good when the other threat is a 7/8 creature that you really can't deal with either. So you could say that Phoenix made this archetype pretty good. So really, what made this card good and what made it better than what it was in Standard? Well, Manamorphose, Faithless Looting, Thought Scours, things like that, where you could just have a turn where you could basically cycle a spell to get the mana that you need, make a blue and a red, then Thought Scour yourself, then Faithless Looting, and if you got 1 or 2 of these guys in there, it's over. You know, you put 6 power into play on turn 2 or turn 3. Sometimes turn 2, like that's just good enough, where you can just hit them for 6, and then hit them from another 6, and then bolt them out of the game. That is insane and very, very, very powerful, that some players either don't think about or just take for granted that they could just win the game out of nowhere with this. Also, again, like I mentioned earlier, pairing it up with Thing in the Ice and just being able to flip a 7/8 into play and then bring your Arclight Phoenixes into play. Well, they have no board and only really the spells in their hand. If they're just tapped out and you're flipping a Thing in the Ice and then you're bringing back 2 Arclight Phoenixes, more than likely it's game over, because you just have to hit them once, or they have to fetch or deal damage to themselves in some way, and they're within double bolt range, or just getting back another Arclight Phoenix, hitting them, and then bolting them, and it's game over. Like, this card is amazing in Modern, and brings up the very heated debate of, like, should Faithless Looting be banned, should Mox Opal, or should Ancient Stirrings be banned? And while that's a different discussion for a different day, it definitely makes Faithless Looting look very inviting, and playing this deck even more inviting, when you could just easily win game 1, and then just have to try to win game 2 or game 3, and still be able to play through Graveyard Hate because of cards like Crackling Drake. Now, the Legacy version of this, I don't know a whole lot about the Legacy version. I just know it can go turn 1, Dark Ritual Buried Alive, or Dark Ritual Entomb, and then Thoughtseize them, and then still get back a Phoenix after you took away either their threat or their interaction for you, and that sounds freaking awesome. Alright, just getting to put Buried Alive, putting 3 creatures from your library into your graveyard, and just putting 3 Arclight Phoenixes in there after you turn 2 Ponder to do whatever, Dark Ritual, Buried Alive. You got your 3 instant sorceries. You're putting 3, hopefully, if you're not very lucky, but able to find one of the other ones, putting 4 Phoenixes into play for a total of 12 power on turn 2 is nuts and very, very, very hard to beat. Just like it is in Modern, still very hard to beat in Legacy, and probably even harder to do in Legacy than it is Modern. So, kind of wrap this up. I've been rambling on for quite a while, for like the last 9-10 minutes. So, what should we expect from this card? Or rather, kind of what is my take from it, is probably a better way of putting it. This card was very undervalued. I undervalued it when it came into Standard. It's nuts. It's very nutty. If you're going to play a Modern deck or a Legacy deck, this would probably be one of the ones I would play, just from the sheer explosiveness and consistency that the deck has with all of the with the basic mana base it gets to play. Like, I'll focus on Modern more than Legacy, just because I don't know a whole lot about the Legacy version of this. Just the fact that you get to play 12 blue-red duels that all come into play untapped, either conditionally or unconditionally, and that you get to play around Blood Moon, and you get to play Blood Moon in your deck. On top of it, you also just get to put a huge clock into play with Thing in the Ice, or just 2 Arclight Phoenixes. Usually good enough and can win you the game almost out of nowhere. Obviously, your opponent will see it coming, and they'll expect it when you go Steam Vent Serum Visions, and they think, wow, you're Storm, and then you just play Manamorphose, Thought Scour, and then you bring back 4 Phoenixes. It's like, well, there's nothing I can do about that. in reality, this card's very powerful. The decks that it's in are very powerful. It is a very underestimated card. Not anymore, but was when it was first spoiled and when it was first coming onto the standard scene, and then dipping its toes into Modern Legacy. And yeah, that's going to be our spotlight for Arclight Phoenix. A very powerful card. Really more just probably going over the decks than really like going over and talking about this card in general. But if anything, all the praise that I've given it and all the things that it's been able to spawn and all the decks that it's played in, those decks really wouldn't be a thing without this card, and its payoffs, while still good, or the other payoffs that they play in the deck are still good, this makes it very much more inviting and much more of a reward for building around this card specifically and playing a bunch of spells in your deck than it is playing with other creatures or like counter spells or things like that. Just being a more streamlined aggro deck that does fancy burn things and can also just fluke 10, 13 power into play on turn 3 or turn 4. And again, that's gonna be it for Arclight Phoenix. Evaluating it, looking at it from a perspective of a competitive player and maybe even like a casual player to help understand why this card is good and why this card is very powerful and going to be a mainstay in Modern as long as cards like Faithless Looting and Thought Scour are still legal and people are still playing them along with Manamorphose. That's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment a card that you would like to see a review or a spotlight on. Maybe it's a card that's like your favorite, or maybe one that you don't understand is how it's good, or anything like that. Please feel free to leave a suggestion in the comments. You could see it in a video in the future. This is going to be it for me. Be on the lookout for spoilers from War of the Spark and Modern Horizons coming. I'm very excited about Modern Horizons. Can't wait to see what other new cards and sweet things that we're going to get for the Modern format that are going to skip standard. It's going to be friggin' great. But anyway, that's going to be it for me. I'll see you guys in the next video.